Thank you so much.
So I recently got back from a trip to the Philippines where I was making a documentary about Joan Ley, her husband Virgilio, and their 4 kids. The family lives under a tin roof on top of a meshed-together wooden floor on a rice plantation. In exchange for renting the land, Virgilio will work the fields. Virgilio's job in the fields is the family's only source of income, and they make $4 to $12 a day, depending on the harvest. Joan Ley's greatest joy is being a homemaker. She loves looking after her family, cooking for them, washing their clothes, and making sure that her kids are getting their homework done. Also, she helps Virgilio in the fields when she can. 2 years ago, this all changed. Joan Ley's vision began to deteriorate. Images became blurred. She became sensitive to light. She was going blind. The world, as that family knew it, began to drastically change. 2 of her kids had to stop going to school to help the family. Joan Ley could no longer support herself and relied on Virgilio's assistance on a regular basis. And Virgilio adopted the motherly roles of Joan Ley and began to cook and clean. Things only got worse, though. Joan Ley eventually became completely blind, and her favorite things in life were now taken from her. Now, Virgilio is accompanied by his boys and the rice fields, and Joan Ley is left at home alone. We watched as she used her cane to navigate the world around her. She struggled to wash her own clothes, to use a bathroom, to take a shower. Her condition impacted her life not only physically, but also spiritually. Once when we were alone, Joan Ley told us that she hates herself. So much so that when she's by herself, she cries. I tried to put myself in Joan Ley's shoes and envision myself back in the States. And at least living in America, I would have support that disabled communities have access to. But Joan Ley has nothing. And as a blind woman in a developing country with minimal support, she was forced to experience a tiny bit of the world she used to inhabit. The thought alone was hard to wrap my mind around while looking at these types of living conditions. And I began to realize that her condition not only shifted her identity as a mother, but it also shifted Virgilio's identity. Her condition did not just take her, but it also took Virgilio as well, as he had to adopt the roles as a mother in addition to his as a father to their 4 sons. Virgilio does not see this as a burden, though. He expressed to us that his love for Joan Ley is endless, and his family is the most important thing to him. And that, to me, is so special, such a universal truth, that we all do what we can for the people we love. Virgilio and Joan Ley described the day that Joan Ley insisted that they go to a clinic to get her eyes checked on and hopefully figure out what might be wrong. And knowing that they could not afford this, Virgilio agreed. What is amazing is that when they arrived at that clinic, a nurse informed them of what Joan Ley had was treatable. It was cataracts. And better yet, there was a medical mission that was taking place there where doctors from Manila, the capital of the Philippines, and doctors from the United States were coming to offer their services for free. They would provide Joan Ley with a free 10-minute surgery, and in 24 hours, she would be able to see again. The miracle facing this family was almost biblical. Now, in the States, you'll find that cataracts just come with old age, and they are generally treated at early signs. But in the developing world, due to malnutrition and sun exposure, the risk of developing early cataracts is greater. Anywhere from babies to teenagers to adults like Joan Ley, who is 46 years old, can be affected. And there are approximately 36 million people worldwide that suffer from unnecessary blindness, and more than half of those are due to cataracts, which is treatable. And I just want us to look at some stats to put things into perspective of just how inhibiting cataracts are to people in the developing world. So 9 out of the 10 of the world's blind live in developing countries. 90% of people impacted from cataracts can no longer work. 50% of the blind report a loss of social standing and decision-making authority, and 80% of all women note a loss of authority within their families. And 33% of people have a decrease in life expectancy. Now, hundreds of others were attending this clinic in the same condition as Joan Ley. All of them were blind, afraid, and some had just accepted their fate of what they called living in the dark place. This is Antonio, a blind man who, like Joan Ley, has lived without his vision for 2 years and was being cared for by his niece. Omar was in an accident where he was electrocuted and lost his vision. Dr. Levinson would be one of the ophthalmologists assisting with these operations. He's a Jacksonville-based doctor who has dedicated his life to giving back and giving others the gift of sight. He was one of 5 ophthalmologists that came over to offer their support and skills for the clinic. And Dr. Malabay is an ophthalmologist based in Manila who also attended the clinic. And when I asked him, how many cataract surgeries do you think he's done? He paused and he looked at me and he said 50,000 is modest in the past 13 years. Here's a photo of 2 foreigners being hit on by a woman who just got her bandages taken off. She immediately grabbed our attention and started to tell us how handsome we were as we had the woman in the back translate for us. She invited Phil, our producer here, and I back to her home where she offered to cook us rice. She said we could stay a while. She said she would take care of us. It was a very tempting offer. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you some raw footage that we got back. Keep in mind, none of this is edited, colored, or mixed. And as we're watching it, I'll walk us through it. So.
We'll take good care of her. Come.
I watched as Joan Ley said goodbye to Virgilio and made her way back to the operating room.
There'll be a chair for you to sit in up ahead.
Huwag kang natakot.
Would you rather me visit chair?
It was quiet as she patiently sat there and waited for the doctors to bring her back. And they put a numbing agent in both of Joan Ley's eyes.
Are you ready for surgery?
And while her eyes would be numb, she was awake and conscious during the whole operation and procedure.
Is this for me?
And just a disclaimer, there is footage of the actual surgery in here, so if you do get queasy, I would just recommend looking away for this part. And it's very brief.
Very good.
And what the doctors will use is a fish hook-like scalpel, and they'll try to scoop the hard cataract out of her eye, and then they'll put in the artificial lens, and she will be able to see again.
Okay. Lalagay na natin yung...
So in 10 minutes, they completed the surgery, guided Joan Ley back to the waiting room where she was greeted by Virgilio. And Virgilio was relieved, optimistic, and hopeful that the surgery was a success. And in 24 hours, Doctors Malabay and Levinson met Joan Ley, Virgilio, her kids, and her sister-in-law, and they began to take off Joan Ley's bandages. And she hesitated at first to open her eyes because she was scared of the light, and also her eyes were still sensitive. Virgilio kept asking her, "Can you see me? Can you see me?" And she finally nodded. She could see him.
Now you see me? Oh.
You could see Joan Ley and her family's 2-year journey summed up in this very moment. Levinson and Malabay smiled and congratulated the family and went on their way and proceeded to take off the bandages of hundreds of other patients. Now later on, Virgilio came back and looked at them in awe and was so endlessly grateful for what they had done. In just a few minutes, they had forever altered this family's future. They just changed their life.
What can I say?
And what was equally significant is that each of the doctors involved expressed the same perspective to me, that their patients were their heroes. And this was so extremely powerful and profound. It affirmed my passion for filming these life-changing events and telling stories of change. To capture this type of raw emotion, to capture someone's journey in this capacity, all I can hope for is to bring this type of feeling to an audience. So maybe when you walk away, you can look at the world a little differently.
And all in all, 5 surgeons performed over 300 cataract surgeries in just 14 days. Now, the way that cataract surgeries are conducted in the States is extremely expensive, and the machines are cumbersome. And ultimately, it's unrealistic to perform the Western version of cataract surgeries in the developing world. So what these doctors did was utilize a manual surgical technique that was pioneered by this man, Dr. Sanduq Ruit, who is known as the God of Sight. And Ruit came from this village. He was born to rural, illiterate parents in the remote mountainous village in northeast Nepal. And his village was a tiny cluster of 200 people, located 11,000 feet above sea level in one of the most remote regions of Nepal, with no electricity, no school, no health facility or modern means of communication. And his home lies blanketed under snow for 6 to 9 months out of the year. And it's about a 5 days walk to the nearest city. So this man right here left his home, invented a surgical technique, mastered it, used it to help reverse the rate of blindness in his home country of Nepal, and then proceeded to upload a video of the surgical technique to YouTube, where doctors around the world saw it and began to learn it. Doctors from India, Ethiopia, doctors from the United States, like Dr. Levinson. All of them used it to help their communities, to help people like Joan Ley. Now, I believe that unlikely heroes are all around us. You see them everywhere. They can come from all walks of life, and they hail from all professions. This is a photo of my high school film teacher, Mr. Maddox, who is one of my heroes. And shortly after this photo was taken, Mr. Maddox passed away from cancer. And you could ask any student who is serious about film, and they would tell you about how he impacted their life and pushed them to pursue their dreams. And Mr. Maddox helped me affirm my passion for film and my drive. So these unlikely heroes can come in all colors, from any gender, and from any person, and from all places. Heroes like Barack Obama, Malala, Rosa Parks, Mr. Rogers, and many more were able to address and help tackle some of our toughest problems, touching the lives of individuals and communities around the world. And these individuals all started from somewhere, and at some point, they were unlikely. Not one of them imagined for a second that they might make a difference in the world around them. And I believe that individuals who are underrepresented, who are on the fringes of society, who are unlikely, will have the strongest point of view. And they will have the most to say. They can be the ones that push society forward. And I think it is our responsibility to support them. My eyes first opened to this notion up a year ago when we created a documentary series that aired on the Olympic Channel, Eurosport, and Snapchat called Far From Home. And it followed 6 unlikely winter athletes in their quest to the 2018 Winter Olympic Games. We traveled to 12 countries and made 237 minutes of content. And I had the privilege, and a very sacred privilege, of telling the stories of 3 of the 6 athletes. I worked with Julian Yee, who you just saw, a figure skater from Malaysia, Carrie Russell and Jasmine Finlater of the Jamaican bobsleigh team, and Shiva Keshavan, an Indian luger who was born in the Himalayas. And Julian Yee grew up in a tropical country training in shopping malls. He would teach himself by watching YouTube videos. And he became Malaysia's first ever Winter Olympian. Jasmine Findlater and Carrie Russell, an unlikely duo who became Jamaica's first Olympic female bobsleigh team, did this without any winter sports facility. And Jasmine, who competed for Team USA in the Sochi Games, decided to make the switch back to Jamaica, where her father was from. And she teamed up with Carrie Russell, a native to Jamaica, and a track superstar who had never stepped foot in a bobsleigh or ever seen snow in her life. And Shiva Keshavan, who was at the time going for his 6th Winter Olympic Games, his 6 games. Athletes hope to make it to 1. And he did this without any help from the government and without any Winter Olympic training facility. And for us, the journey itself was the goal. Each of these stories defied all odds and preconceived notions of who they are and what they look like or where they hail from. It was an opportunity to use our tools as filmmakers and give them some platform to elevate their mission, and to hopefully document and show other people, people who look like them, people who come from their home country or a country similar, that they too can achieve that or whatever they want. There are no boundaries. And it was exciting because after the documentaries were all said and done and the games were complete, some of the athletes went out to the International Olympic Committee headquarters where they got together with other high-level executives and they screened their films there. They talked about their experience. They shared the story of their journey. And together with the International Olympic Committee heads, they discussed ways to bring winter sports infrastructure back to their home country. And for us filmmakers, this was such a proud moment because we could see our film transcending the screen and actually helping someone and hopefully helping many more. And that is why, for me, as a filmmaker, I've made it my life mission to try to utilize the tools that I have to find these types of stories, to find these individuals and help give them the confidence or support that they need to spread their message. I'm here to just pass them the mic. And you know, there are many people I've met along the way that have profoundly impacted my life, and I consider them all unlikely heroes. Doctors Malabai and Levinson, Virgilio and Joan Ley, my film teacher, Mr. Maddox, Julian, Jasmine, Carrie and Shiva, the people I've worked with along the way. These encounters and the opportunity to be vulnerable with people is what brings me hope and happiness, and the ability to see that we have more in common than we think we do. And I believe that ideas that could solve our toughest problems don't come from just one group of people. They come from all walks of life, and oftentimes people who can help solve some of the world's most pressing problems need support. They need a platform, and they need the resources and tools to execute. And they need help sharing ideas to the world. So whether you meet someone from a small rural town of 200, or you meet someone who looks different than you, or someone who hails from a different country, give them a chance. Whether you are a brand, an organization, or just an individual, stop. Listen to their story. Be an ally and support them. You do not need to be a filmmaker or to travel to have these types of experiences. All you have to do is look in your backyard. And ultimately, it is up to you on how you engage with people. But I promise, if you do, you will be pleasantly surprised. And you never know who you might be giving that confidence to and what they might do with it. And I can guarantee you that you'll learn a little bit about yourself along the way. Thank you.